Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade. Well guys, in this video we're going to be looking at some powerful and really interesting items that will be coming back from dungeons of old expansions and also the raids, the old raids from Shadowlands in Season 4. So now with that out of the way, let's talk about the first expansion that we're going to be checking out, and this is Warlords of Draenor. Okay guys, in Warlords of Draenor, we only have one item that we can talk about that's really powerful that all red paladins might want to get. So this item drops from the Iron Docks and you have to be in loot spec protection to get it because for whatever reason it's coded as a protection item. So this is the Enforcer's Stun Grenade. This thing is extremely powerful because it gives you main stat burst, which is really good because it adds flat damage, and also gives you an on-use effect of granting versatility for 20 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. This is really powerful for us because remember, in Season 4, we are losing the relics, so that relic is going away. So our wings are no longer on a 1.5-minute cooldown most of the time, and now are back to being only a 2-minute cooldown ability. So getting a trinket that's exactly the amount of cooldown of our wings is going to be really important to do maximum damage. So this Enforcer's Stun Grenade covers all the necessities of a Retribution Paladin in terms of on-use effect trinket. It's going to be better than anything else that we can get from other options, even Shadowlands raids, or any other dungeon for that matter, you know. So if you're going to do Mythic Plus next patch, this is the trinket that you want to farm, and it's only going to be in Iron Docks. Now let's go to the next expansion that we're going to talk about, and that's Legion. So Legion, guys, was a great expansion, and it shows in the quality of items that dropped from its dungeons. Many of the items that dropped from these dungeons had some interesting passive effects of niche utility or extra damage gains. And that's what we're going to see here in Lower and Upper Karazhan. Let's start with Lower Karazhan first. The first item we're going to check out is the Cloak of Sweltering Flame. So this drops from the Opera Hall boss Beautiful Beast. It's a pretty niche effect. Whenever you take fire damage, you get a burst of movement speed for 3 seconds that can only proc every 10 seconds. Although this effect is, like I said, very niche because you're not taking fire damage all the time, in this dungeon it actually has a lot of value because there's a lot of bosses that do fire damage, which this small burst of movement speed might save you from moving to another mechanic or just moving more fast in a fight. It also has really nice stats for Retribution Paladins as it has haste and mastery heavy. Now let's go to the next item. The Maging of Virtue has a really powerful healing cloak. Although it doesn't increase any damage to you as a Retribution Paladin, it does increase your survivability because we do heal a lot with War of Glory and Flash of Light. We even heal with our Consecration if you're taking the conduit that makes Consecration heal. So this item increases your healing critical effects by 5%, which is pretty powerful, and might help you survive some mechanics or just heal yourself enough to survive heavy damage and high keys. Now let's go to the next item. So the item is the Choker of Barbaranes. This item drops from Atumen the Huntsman, and it has a really niche effect that whenever you take damage, you can deal AoE physical damage to things around you, which is pretty decent because you normally take incidental damage in keys, and while the effect isn't huge, it's free damage, so everyone likes free damage. Now let's go to the next item. So the item is the Seal of Darkshire Nobility. This ring is a pretty strong ring because whenever you hit an enemy for the first time, they will deal 10% less damage to you for 4 seconds, which is really powerful, especially for Retribution Paladins because sometimes we do get aggro on pulls. So having a 10% DR the first 4 seconds of a pull is going to be really important. It might help you get that bop or bubble off or heal yourself enough to survive the initial onslaught of aggro if you ever get it. And even if you don't get aggro, this also might help you survive like any incidental damage on pull, which is really strong, you know, so you should get it if you can next patch. Also, the stats aren't that bad. Versatility and mastery are pretty decent for any Retribution Paladin. Now let's go to the next part, Upper Karazhan. So from Upper Karazhan, guys, there's only 3 items that I'm going to mention, and 2 of them are part of a 2-set combo. So the first one is the Amulet of the Lost Guardian. This is the first part of a 2-set that's combined with the Wine-Stained Mantle, and it says, whenever you kill a Legion dungeon boss, you increase your damage and healing by 10% for 2 minutes. So this is going to make your life easier in these Karazhan dungeons, because if you're going fast between trash and bosses, you will get a lot of value from this effect. The next item is the Ring of Collapsing Futures. So this ring has an on-use effect that has a 15-second cooldown that deals shadow damage to an enemy, a single enemy, you know? So it's a pretty decent effect, but it has a catch. If you use this thing every 15 seconds, there is a chance that it's going to go on a 5-minute cooldown, which is really bad because then you lose all the value of this thing. But there's also a trick. If you use this thing every 30 seconds, the ring will never go on that 5-minute cooldown, which is the way you should use it. So you have to micromanage this thing and not just bind it to whatever key you press really often, you know? So there's a small amount of managing with this item, but it's free damage if you do it. So I recommend doing it if you get this ring. Now let's go to the next set of dungeons that are the Mechagnome dungeons from BFA. Okay guys, for the BFA dungeons, the Mechagnome ones, they have really powerful rings, well, sets of rings. So on the junkyard part of the dungeons, you will find the logic loops, and in the workshop part of the dungeons, you will find the bit bands. So these dungeons work in a weird way, because the first rings, the logic loops, will say if you do certain thing, you will get an effect. And if the other parts, the bit bands, will say, well, are the effect itself. So the key with these rings is getting the easiest way to get the effect and the best effect itself. So let's go through those. So for logic loops, you want to get either the logic loop of division that says if you damage an enemy while you're behind them, you get the effect, which is really easy to do as a DPS player because you're normally always behind your target. And the other one is the logic loop of recursion. If you use 3 different spells on the same target, you get the effect. So these two are pretty easy things to fulfill as a DPS player, so those are the ones that you're looking for as logic loops. For bit bands, the best effects that you can get are the first one, and the best one is the overcloaking bit band. This thing says then you gain haste for 15 seconds. The amount of haste this thing gave in BFA, I remember, was about 4 epic gems, so not the blue gems that we have now. This thing had the effect of 4 epic gems, so it was extremely powerful effect. It's basically like the equivalent, I guess, to getting an extra trinket. Now, the next effect that you might want to get if you can't get the haste one is the shorten bit band. So only get this if you actually can't get the haste one, or like haste is really trash for you. I don't think there's a class where haste is really bad, but anyways, the shorten bit band says whenever you fulfill the effect, you will deal nature damage to one enemy that's nearby. It's a pretty simple effect, and even though it's not as powerful as haste, it's also worth getting if you can't get the haste one. So guys, those are the best items that we can get from the BFA dungeons. Now let's go to the best items that you can get from the raids. Okay guys, so for items from the raid that we want to get next season, for trinkets, there's basically only one option that every red paladin, basically every DPS player that's a melee is going to be using, and this is the Old Warrior Soul. This thing is just too powerful. It has too much of a budget for its secondary stats. As you can see here, at a 285 item level, the thing gives you 250 stats of haste when it's fully stacked. That's just crazy. Those stats are also pretty easy to like keep up in a dungeon setting because you keep pulling stuff and just keep getting in combat so the stacks don't drop. And in raids, it's basically permanently on. So the thing is just too strong, and you won't ever get any other trinket from either dungeons or raids that isn't the Old Warrior Soul. Okay, so for weapons, we do have choices next patch. So the first one is Jaethys the Prism Blade, and the second option that we can get is the Gavel of the First Arbiter, the weapon from the Jailer. So these two weapons are really powerful in their own right. Don't get me wrong, both of them are really strong. But on the basis of consistency, I can't pick anything else than Jaethys the Prism Blade. So this weapon I think is going to be our best option because, like I said, consistency. Whenever you feed the weapons to Jaethys, it's going to get you in the end a proc of strength and a proc of damage, and that's basically it. It's always going to do your damage either single target or AoE. It's always going to be there, you know. There's no, like, if you're doing AoE, you miss the AoE part. It's always going to do damage. It's a pretty consistent weapon. While the Gable, although extremely powerful if you get the correct proc, especially like if you get the AoE proc and the AoE situation, it's going to do massive damage. But if you don't get it and you get the single target proc in AoE, it's going to feel really bad because you're not doing anything, because this thing doesn't have secondary stats. And if you get, for example, well, if you get the AoE proc and single target, it's not that bad. It's not the end of the world. You're still doing damage. But if you get the single target proc in AoE, then it feels really bad, like I said before. So guys, if you ask me, I'm going to go for Jaitis the Prison Blade next patch as soon as I can get it. And well guys, that's the end of the video. I hope this video was informative for you guys and helped you like recognize some really interesting and cool items that we're going to be able to use next patch. And well, if you like the video, like it and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for watching, everyone.